A new Australian film is going on a national tour from March to May in selected cinemas around Australia, a film called The Lonely Spirits Variety Hour. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of the film, Platon Theodoris. Platon, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Oh, g'day. Thank you for having me.
Now, I know that this film is based on a stage play. Tell me about the inspiration behind the play and converting that into a film.
Well, so the stage play was written and acted by a very talented person called Nitin Vengulekar. I had the privilege of working with Nitin on my first film, Alvin's Harmonious World of Opposites. So we become friends. I went to see his stage play and every iteration of the stage play, sort of beginning 2017. It was put on at the Bankstown Arts Centre in Sydney Southwest, and also at the Griffin Theatre in Darlinghurst. And it was written by Nitin, it starred Nitin, and it was kind of a series of gags, I guess, and monologues broken up by other acts. So it was a sort of a variety show. Look, I fell in love with Nitin's character, Neville Umbrella Man. His, and his amazing kind of monologues and take on the world. And I approached Nitin and said, look, I think there might be a film in it. Can I option the stage play? He went, yeah, great. And kind of it took a few years to move that stage play into sort of the film world. It was very much sort of stand-up comedy and performance based. There wasn't really a narrative structure to it, but I guess, Nitin was like, take it, do what you want with it. And it took a while. The stage play, the adaptation of the stage play into a screenplay took probably kind of two and a half years. Yeah, and then sort of in late 2019, we kind of had a draft that we were happy with, and then we planned to shoot mid 2020, of course, which we did, but obviously that was kind of a bit stressful because we weren't sure if we were going to get to film everything because of the first lockdown. Yeah, so.
Well, congratulations on getting it to that stage, and then to have it filmed and to adapt the stage production and into a coherent screenplay and film, of course. So, was there any production money or any support behind you? Because I gather this was very much a low-budget film.
Yeah, look, it was made independently. When I say independently, without the screen agency's funding. I don't think screen agencies would kind of necessarily want to fund something like this either. I don't think it's up their alley. It was made by a group of very passionate collaborators, and I need to kind of thank, obviously, Nitin Vengulekar, who was the lead in the stage play and who kind of came on board to play the lead in the film, and also kind of helped adapt the stage play into a screenplay. So he has a writer's credit as well for that. But also just the wonderful performance artists and actors and collaborators who came on board. Sabrina Chandangelo, who plays kind of Neville's love interest, and all the other wonderful actors. There was a cast of over 30. My co-producer on this is also the editor and cinematographer, Brian Rapsey. And yeah, it's never easy making something independently. I just felt passionately about bringing Neville Umbrella Man to the big screen. And so you find a way. You find a way to make it happen. Alvin's Harmonious World of Opposites, my first feature, was made independently. And this one we found a way. I found some great composers. I mean, there were 4 different composers, composing teams, I should say, for this film, because there are 22 original tracks and 1 cover, which we won't say what it is because it's a bit of a spoiler. we did have some crowdfunding campaign towards the end of post-production. And I did have some wealthy arts patrons who came on board as executive producers late in the stage to help complete the film. But generally it was made independently without sort of that screen agency involvement.
Okay.
So,
How long did it take you to shoot it?
we shot 35 shoot days, but over sort of 3 blocks. Originally, it wasn't going to be 3 blocks, but because of COVID and the lockdowns, and because the state borders were closed, we had to kind of break it up into 3 sections. We shot the first block over about 20 shoot days, over sort of 4 weeks, which was the big stuff in the studio, all that stuff in the studio and the garage. And then we shot a big block about a month and a half later in a hospital, and in sort of medical sort of centres. And then we had to wait for the borders to open because we were shooting out of Australia, some of Australia's big things, and the border, and we're a New South Wales-based production. We had to wait for the borders to open so that we could come into Victoria and shoot at the giant koala at Dadswell's Bridge there, and also the giant Murray cod at Swan Hill, and also to travel down and shoot at the giant lobster in Kingston, South Australia. So that actually didn't happen until March 2021. And we had already sort of started editing the bulk of the film, but we're missing about 10 scenes, which we only shot in March and kind of finished up the final edit sort of late 2021, yeah.
What a process, what a journey. It's
It was.
Yeah, how very interesting. When I was watching the film, I was trying to come to mind some other sorts of films that I've seen that reminded me a little bit of Lonely Spirits Variety Hour. I mean, Wayne's World to some extent in terms of the underground. In their case, it was a TV show, but it was radio in this case, and The Big Sick in terms of illness and so on. So it's interesting how a number of films came to mind. Was there any particular film inspiration behind you writing the screenplay adaptation and filming?
Well, that's a really good question, because I didn't have anything in mind, but now that you mention Wayne's World, it's such a great reference. I didn't actually think of that as a reference writing the screenplay, but there is a silliness and an absurdity to Wayne's World, which kind of does permeate the Lonely Spirits Variety Hour. I can't say that I did have a particular film in mind. I have to say that I love stories that kind of have layers of worlds, kind of build layers of worlds and have sort of different worlds to them. So, but yeah, no, there wasn't a particular film that I had in mind, actually. I was very much thinking of Alvin's, my first feature, and the film that I want to produce after this, The Unity of All Things, which kind of, it's done in that similar style and vein, which is, it's a bit sort of, there's a hyper realism there, there's a magical realism there, there's an absurdity and a weirdness to it. And I guess I was thinking of those projects, but yeah, it's a good question, but I will take Wayne's World.
Okay. Yeah.
Really, I mean, it's such a, I can really see how that, how Wayne's World. I mean, look, the stage play, though, having said that, was very much inspired by, Nitin is a big fan of Jacques Tati and Jacques Tati films and the physicality of Jacques Tati. So we did very much have sort of Jacques Tati in the back of our minds when we were playing, when we were developing Neville and Bellarmine for screen. There was a lot of that in Nitin's stage play. There is also the verboseness and the wordiness and the way of the delivery of sort of Spike Milligan in the way that Neville and Bellarmine, the character, and the way that Nitin delivers those sorts of spiels in on radio, on air. So that was sort of in the back of our mind, but I think when we started rehearsing with all the other collaborators and performers, it sort of became its own thing. I mean, Alison Bennett, T. Kim Pok, Sabrina Chandangelo, a lot of these sort of performers in the film, Peter Gazariotis, and even sort of Dincha and who plays the dad, and Joyce, they've all come. They're all sort of seasoned performers and actors, so they all had a lot to bring to the rehearsal process. And we did rehearse for sort of 2.5 months prior to filming, so we were very kind of, I guess we were kind of on the same page by the time we got to the film shoot, you know.
Okay. Very interesting, very interesting. And tell me about the set design and all the different objet d'art and all sorts of other things, the old radios and everything in that set, in that garage or whatever it is where you shot it, which I found very interesting, because setting that up and then, of course, unsetting it when things change. Tell me about sourcing all of that.
Yeah, look, I have to kind of confess something, that probably about half those props came from my partner and I's house. So my partner and I are what some people will call hoarders, what some people will call connoisseurs of fine vintage things, collectors, salvagers of vintage stuff. So look, we had a lot of that propping already in our home. Having said that, we did spend a month sourcing other props. Like a lot of the radios, we didn't have a lot of some of those key props. A lot of the artwork, the organ we didn't have, of course. But my partner helped set dress, and then I built the set with a couple of friends over a weekend, and then we spent about sort of 2 to 3 weeks set dressing the thing. Look, a lot of op shopping, a lot of vintage stores, a lot of eBaying to kind of get everything we needed. But about half the stuff came from our house, because we sort of like collecting a lot of those bits and pieces and odds and ends, and that Australiana stuff as well. There's a lot of Australiana in there as well, which we collect. But you know, it was about building a world, and so every little kind of detail in that was important. I mean, we do travel to a lot of big animals to film in. We did have a lot of kind of Australiana stuff, and in some ways it was crucial because we wanted to sort of subvert that Australiana and what it means, but also kind of have fun with it. A lot of it is so ridiculous. You know, you watch a lot of these kind of big, grand European or American films, and they feature so many kind of interesting, big, great places. And I think for us, it was getting all those details right in those sort of small things, but then also going to those big, grand Australian places that aren't often celebrated on the big screen, like the giant koala, which is hideous, the big merino. And I encourage people to travel out to these places. I mean, you get there and you are in awe of them, and you think, wow, you know, the big merino, the giant lobster, the giant Murray cod. I mean, there are so many other big things to visit, really. But we had to build a lot of these sort of details. So we had, you know, I don't know if you noticed, you know, we had kind of stubby holders from the big merino, and we had teaspoons from the giant lobster, and we had, you know, giant koala memorabilia, and you know, all that sort of stuff. So look, months of collecting and sourcing, but yeah, I mean, for me, I think production design is a really big element of filmmaking, and I think you've got to get it right to build these worlds, to get a sense of the character and their backstory and what they like, and yeah.
Okay, all right. Again, very interesting.
Thank you.
And the film also taps into this whole notion of late night radio, overnight radio, where hosts sort of ruminate on their lives and hope that someone will call in and talk to them, etc. But here's a character who's just going on about his philosophy of life and how he sees the world and how lonely he is and all that sort of thing. So again, you tap into that sort of late night radio phenomenon, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, did you connect with that as a radio announcer and someone who's worked in radio for so many years? And I mean, did you connect with him on that level?
Probably not to a great extent, because my radio shows are very specific and transactional and film based and all that sort of thing. So I don't sort of ruminate about life or anything like that. But nevertheless, I understood it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, Neville Umbrellaman could have, I mean, and this is Nitin's joke, could have, a million listeners, give or take a million, so there could be like no one listening, or a million people listening. But it was really about, as we developed the stage play into a screenplay, it became less about loneliness actually, and more about projecting your kind of energy and passion and life force into the world, and hopefully that it connects with someone. And I think a lot of people that kind of go on these creative endeavors, whatever they are, in some ways they're looking for connection. And it's no different to the character Neville Umbrellaman. I mean, he obviously brings kind of people on the show, has guests on the show, because it is a variety show. But his ultimate goal is to connect. And he sort of does a terrible job at it, really, in the film.
Well, it's Wayne's Worldish, but there you go. Now, I was interested to see that your film was selected as part of the Melbourne International Film Festival. Tell me about that. How did that come about?
Yeah, look, we just, as an indie filmmaker, and there are probably indie filmmakers listening, you put your submission up on Film Freeway, you pay that expensive submission fee, and you hope for the best, of course. Thankfully, the film was accepted. We kind of were one of, I think, very few films that came out of sort of the independent sphere, which means it wasn't backed by screen agencies. We had screened at the Perth International Film Festival before that. And then our second screening was at the Melbourne International Film Festival. We were nominated for an Innovation Award, the Black Magic Innovation Award, which was just a wonderful kind of, just to be acknowledged that way. I mean, we're a small micro budget film. The film was really well received at the film festival. We had some great screenings and great Q&A screenings. And I guess part of this autumn tour, I mean, we are bringing the film back to ACME and to the Theatre Royal in Castlemaine as part of this autumn tour. Part of this autumn tour is really kind of harnessing that festival vibe. We loved watching the film with big audiences. We loved where a film festival audience broke out into applause, or the whole cinema would burst out into laughter. And so a lot of this sort of autumn tour is sort of bringing these event screenings back into cinemas, getting audiences to sort of share it with friends and family, because I think comedy is best enjoyed with a crowd. And we realized that at the Melbourne International Film Festival, where the crowds were so responsive, the applause, the Q&As were so lively. And so, yeah, part of sort of bringing it back into cinemas is because we had such a wonderful time on the festival circuit.
Okay. Speaking of Q&As, I mean, as you said, from March to May, the film will be screening around Australia as event screenings with Q&As, etc. And you'll be there, and etc. And Nitin and so on. But what was the most bizarre question that you've been asked in the Q&As so far?
Yeah, it's fascinating because we screened the film in Saint-Tropez at the Festival des Antipodes in France.
Ah,
And then we also had a screening at the Australian High Commission in Paris
mm,
at that beautiful cinema designed by Harry Seidler, an amazing building. But it was interesting because the Australian audience focused a lot on the burlesque components of some of the performances and some of the guests, whereas the French see that all the time. They were only focused on cats, on the cat songs, the cats in the film, why the cats, you know, I mean, it was really, I mean, French seemed to be kind of in love with cats and clowns, really. But a lot of the questions that we got by the French audience were to do with cats. Why the cat songs? Who wrote the cat songs? Why so many cats? Why this fascination with cats? Why this thing with Schrodinger's cat sort of experiment? All this sort of stuff. It was all to do with cats. No one in Australia kind of touched on that. It was all about kind of, you know, the weird and wonderful absurdist nature of the connection with kind of the big things. So it was interesting. That, yes, weird questions. Look, I was blown away at how many cat questions we got in France.
how very interesting to hear that. Ah, dear, oh dear. You never know what to expect at a Q&A.
No, you don't. You don't. I mean, it was really wonderful. We had a French interpreter there, you know, sort of interpreting all the questions and my answers, and Nitin won sort of best actor at the Festival des Antipodes in France, and he was up against people like Hugo Weaving and some really big cast members. But everyone wanted to ask about those cat songs, and I think for an audience, you're gonna have to go and watch the film. I can't really say much more, other than there are a lot of cats in this one. I mean, there are a lot of koalas in this as well.
Yeah.
But the French were fascinated by that. I
Okay.
don't know what.
Well,
I mean, it is a silly, absurdist, fun film. So
yes.
I mean, it's not. It doesn't take itself too seriously. You know, it's supposed to be entertaining. It does ask some deeper questions about kind of what we're doing here on the planet, existential sort of questions. But yeah, I think it's, you know, we want people to kind of have fun with it.
Okay. Is there a prospect after the tour that you've had around cinemas, event screenings around Australia, that you'll either release the film somehow or put it on streaming or DVD or something like that?
Yeah, look, I think the plan after this sort of autumn tour is perhaps a proper theatrical release later in the year or early next year. So that's still being negotiated, like a proper theatrical release. And we'll probably sort of be able to gauge at which cinemas it does well and which audience and which cities and which towns. And then, yeah, I mean, certainly streaming services, VOD services, free to air. We're in negotiations with the distributor who's hoping to do all of that for us. But in the meantime, we're just encouraging people. I mean, the film should and will go to streaming services, but we just loved the festival vibe and watching it with a big audience in cinemas, and we're just sort of encouraging people to come along and watch it on the big screen with other people. There was nothing like being in a full cinema where the whole cinema was in belly laughs or applauding a certain scene or just kind of laughing out loud, and we really want to share that, you know, watching it on a streamer in your own home, yeah, it'll be fun. But I think a lot of what's funny about it would kind of get lost. There is something enjoyable about comedy when you are watching it with other people.
Sure. No, absolutely understand that. So tell me about the website and how people can get more information.
Yeah, so they can just go to lonelyspiritsfilm.com, and there's a screening section, and we have all the cinemas and all the on the autumn tour listed there, and there are ticket links for the box office for all those. For listeners in Melbourne, we're going to Acme Cinema on April 31st, we're going to Acme Cinemas on March 31st at 7 p.m. And then on April 1st, we're at the Royal Cinema in the Royal Theatre in Castlemaine. And we'll be there with the cast, with the key cast and myself, and kind of to answer any questions. But it's going to, all the major capitals, Sydney, Brizzy, Perth, Adelaide, Hobart, and a lot of regional centres as well. We opened the tour in Bowral at the Empire Cinema. It's going up to Newcastle and a few other great places. So, I hope people enjoy it and can kind of appreciate something like this. I think it's not every day that we kind of have existential comedies in Australia, absurdist existential comedies. Some of the stuff that gets made is so a bit more mainstream, I guess.
Yes. No, fair enough.
Yeah.
Very, very true. That's great. And BYO cats at the screenings. So
cats. Absolutely. And feel free to dress up as a clown as well if you want to come as a clown.
Okay. All right.
To accept questions from clowns as well.
Questions.
We did encourage the most ridiculous and absurd questions at the Q&As. We do give out, for any of the most ridiculous or absurd questions, limited edition tote bags. For any and all of the most ridiculous or absurd questions, which are in keeping with the film's kind of mood and style, of course. I have heard that they're selling on eBay for quite a lot of money, and they have become collector's items.
Merchandising, that's the way to go. I like it. Very good.
We're not selling them, we're giving them out for free, but I think people have been selling these sort of collector's items already.
Why not, indeed. And Platon, just before I let you go, I must ask you, have you seen any other films recently, or in cinema or in streaming or television, whatever, that have impressed you?
Yeah, look, I did watch Triangle of Sadness. I went with my mum, and my mum and my family, my parents, and we come from a very left-wing family. So there are a lot of concepts in that film which really resonated with myself and my mum, and we laughed out loud a lot of times. It is quite a silly film in some ways, but the way it sort of kind of pulls down the capitalist system and plays upon kind of ideologies and kind of the industrial, what do they call it? The industrial military complex, and kind of, the nature of developing and developed worlds and what that means. Yeah, I would recommend it. I really enjoyed it. That's something I've seen recently. I've seen a lot of other films recently as well. But that one has kind of really stayed with me.
Yep, I endorse that.
Look, another one I saw at the Perth International Film Festival. I don't know whether it's going to be a release here. It wasn't at Melbourne, but the Perth programming is far wilder than Melbourne in some ways. They had a French film called After Blue. After Blue. If you could track it down, watch the trailer. I saw it in the cinema there, and I still get goosebumps. I was absolutely blown away. French language film, sort of a 70s sci-fi kind of weird and wonderful film. I still think about that film very much, and I saw it last year, but most recently, certainly Triangle of Sadness.
Okay. I just had a look at the French Film Festival program, which is now playing at Palace Cinemas around Australia, and After Blue is not there, but the title rings a bell somehow, so I'll follow that up. Interesting.
Please do. It was kind of an independent French production. It was made for, I think, about €2 million, which isn't a lot of money in film terms. It really, really has stayed with me. I mean, it's been, it's going on almost a year later, 9 months or whatever it is, and I still want to track it down somewhere and watch it again, and I'd like to watch it again.
Okay. And Platon, just very quickly, I forgot to ask you this. What attracted you to being a filmmaker in the first place?
Wow. Yeah, interesting. What attracted me to being a filmmaker? Look, I think I loved the way that films could just kind of pick you up and take you to these weird and wonderful worlds. I had a VHS that I would just constantly play over and over and over again, which was the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And I just loved how it could just pick me up and take me on this kind of weird and wonderful journey. And then just in sort of high school, whenever I had an opportunity to hand in sort of essays about things, I would ask my teachers if I could hand in a film, and so my dad had a VHS recorder at the time, and I had 2 VHS players that I would kind of edit with, and I would just kind of hand in the film because I was kind of always fascinated by that world. And here I am sort of, 35, 40 years later, just, kind of making, kind of creating interesting and weird and wonderful worlds. My films are, my 2 recent features are not kind of naturalism. They're not, they're hyper real, they're over the top, they're magical, they're kind of, weird and wonderful, And I guess, when was the last time you kind of were able to say those sorts of things about Australian cinema? I think Australians we have this whole genre of dark crime, of horrible men doing horrible things to people in the bush, we have this whole genre of this, and I don't buy it. I think we have enough films of horrible men doing horrible things to people. I don't enjoy those sorts of cinema, that sort of cinema. I like light-hearted comedy. I like kind of sort of surreal and weird and wonderful films, and I like films that sort of explore issues as well. I don't understand why you'd make violent films, for entertainment. The news has enough of that already when you pick up the paper.
Sure. And will your next film be similar to the first 2?
Yeah, I think so. That's the plan. It's called The Unity of All Things, where sort of, hopefully we may be able to secure some screen agency sponsorship for this one, funding, finance, whatever you want to call it. It's weird and wonderful. It's kind of a drama, sci-fi, magical realist, sort of absurdist film. Everything that my first 2 films are. It could be another 7 years if we don't get the money to make that. It's been 7 years since my last one. But you never know. I mean, this one has certainly raised my profile as a filmmaker. It's done really well at festivals. We are taking it on a national tour. So hopefully we find the right collaborators to make the 3rd feature happen. Yeah.
Hopefully. Good luck with it all. We've been speaking to Platon Theodoris, who is the director of the Lonely Spirits Variety Hour on national tour over the next few months, and in Melbourne at ACME on March 31st. Platon, thanks so much for talking with me.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks again.
All the best. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.